Let's talk about this right now with our next guest, Gifford. He's a former British volunteer with the Ukrainian Army and joins us once again. Good afternoon to you, Mesa.
Good afternoon.
Your reaction to this? This is a statement, I said, from Yuri Ushakov. He said in a TV interview, and he's a close aide to apologies, that was Freudian, wasn't it? Vladimir Putin. He said that Russia did not need any steps that imitate peaceful actions in this situation. Any truce must account, he said, for Moscow's interests. And a ceasefire with Ukraine would simply give their military time to rest and rearm. This is nothing other than a temporary respite for the Ukrainian military, nothing more. Your reaction to that, Mesa?
I'm just very not surprised at all. Both sides need a rest. Both sides are suffering in different ways. Yet at the same time, Putin very much feels on top of the world at the moment. I think that's what's very indicative of that is the fact that he went to the front line for the first time either ever or for a very long time. Philip may be able to correct me on that one. But either way, he's very rarely seen on the front, particularly in Kursk, which was always been a thorn in his side and a huge embarrassment to him. Yeah. Him turning up there shows his confidence in that sector of the front line. It also shows that he's very confident where the wind is blowing at the moment. He's seeing a lot of his narratives being played out by the Trump administration, and he's playing tough. I think he thinks that he's got the Ukrainians on the run, and he doesn't need to do a deal just yet.
Yeah, well, we're constantly told, Ukraine cannot win this war, but the war is not going to end. But again, I do think Ukraine could have won this war if we'd given enough aid and given it soon enough, and given the heart and the soul of Ukrainian people and their willingness to fight. I mean, again, given that most people thought that Russia would take Ukraine in a matter of days, I think they put paid to that 3 years on. I mean, the fact that even the Ukrainian army was allowed to take any territory around Kursk. Okay, now it looked like they're in a sort of a pincer movement and being forced out, but it was a negotiating position. But this is the thing: all the pressure from Donald Trump in recent weeks has been on Zelensky. It's been on Ukraine to cede, the mineral rights, to cede territory, to agree to pretty much anything without a security guarantee. We're told that simply having some American drilling companies in Ukraine would somehow provide enough security. But of course, no one sensible believes that. So Putin is quite right to feel that he's got nothing to gain from this. But realistically, doesn't he also want to extricate himself from the war? And if it were the case that he could keep Crimea, as is very likely, keep these 4 regions in the Donbass region, and war could be over, would he not be able to play that as a win for his domestic audience?
Well, we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We don't know what's already been offered to him and everything's what's playing out not in the public eye. He's clearly just trying to improve his hand more than anything else. And just to build on what you've just hinted at and what Philip just said a moment ago, I do hope that Trump starts cracking down and actually forcing him to the table. And there's many ways they can do that. Yeah. I think a lot of Brits have been upset at the sight of a ship severely damaged and heavily polluting our waters with a Russian captain. And they'll be also scared to know that there are a lot of these so-called Russian ghost ships without the proper insurance, without the proper paperwork all over the world. And I would really hope that Britain, America, Europe, etc., will actually start cracking down on these ghost ships, actually forcing them either out of their waters or searching them, detaining them, etc. Also, of course, they've got hundreds of billions of dollars in our monetary system that we could take and give to Ukraine. But bigger than that, and hopefully maybe this is even part why the Saudis are so heavily involved in this. Not only does the Saudi prince have a relationship with Putin, but also it's a major oil producer. I hope America pumps and gets as huge amount of oil out of the ground as possible, drives that price down, and really starts hammering the Russian economy. Because then hopefully it'll bring Putin to his senses.
Well, again, although often it could be the case for Vladimir Putin and your Russian leader that need to sort of be the strong man. When your back's against the wall, he will double down. Bearing in mind, an awful lot of the Russian public, they simply don't see international news. They don't see neutral news. They think that they're fighting a Nazi state in Ukraine. They believe all that Kremlin propaganda. They have no idea what's really going on.
That's the biggest problem. They're very much at capacity at the moment. And that capacity is strong. They are heavily pressuring the Ukrainians all across the front line, don't get me wrong. But for all his talk and for all his bluster, Russia is not the strong country that it likes to claim to be. No. And not only have they driven down their monetary reserves, not only is their industry at capacity, but it's also peaked, plateaued, and hopefully will start to reduce now. They're in a very vulnerable place, and it can get worse if the oil price were to completely crash. So again, I think Ukraine can still win this war, and I've always.
And when you say win, do you mean when you say win, you mean ousting Russia from the Donbass and Crimea?
I think the long-term goal should be to at least return to the 2022 borders. It doesn't have to be a massive military win on the battlefield, but if you look at how Russia has lost wars in the past, it's because of financial crises. Let's say the First World War, and political crises too. A very severe toll was taken on Russia in World War I, despite the fact they still had an army in the field. So again, these are the lessons that we need to learn and we need to build on.
Well, indeed, and again, it's like the economic sanctions. There's so much more that can be done. I found it extraordinary when David Lammy a few weeks back was announcing some extra economic sanctions. We could really take on some of these oligarch friends of Vladimir Putin. I thought, well, why wasn't that done in February 2022? Why are you talking about that in 2025? But we know, even with these economic sanctions, actually, the Russian economy is in dire straits. It's bizarre. It's a smaller economy than Italy, given its huge, fossil fuel wealth. Again, this is what happens when kleptocratic dictators take over and the oligarchs get handed everything and just embezzle it. I mean, it's a failing state in that sense, but. Being able to sell that oil and gas, which they haven't been able to sell officially legally to the European Union and other countries, they're selling it to China, selling it to India. India then ships it onto us. Germany is still reliant on Russian gas absurdly in this situation. There's plenty more that can be done. What do you think about the willingness, though? Because we've got countries like Britain and France, suppose the coalition are saying they're willing to sort of step up and provide troops to basically look over, hold on to a ceasefire, to peacekeeping forces, but not more than that, not to actually fight in Ukraine. And Zelensky's been very clear that he doesn't need the blood of any other nationality. He's got men in the field himself. He just needs the financial and the military aid. Do you think that there is any possibility that we will see British and/or French and other soldiers in Ukraine as a peacekeeping force, or do you think that there's no way in the world that Putin will allow that and will not see that as a provocation by NATO?
Well, it really depends. It's all part of the negotiation and how urgently they consider it, how necessary they consider it. As you said before, Ukraine is the real power here in terms of as a military deterrent to Russia. And if we continue to support them and make their army even better, then so be it. Any force that we do provide may be just a token force. But it might also be able to build infrastructure behind the line, new airfields and better fortifications, to increase the level of training of Ukrainian troops, and just take some of the weight off their shoulder, a real political symbol of support for this future Ukraine that might emerge after these discussions. So this is all part of Russia will have to determine what it wants to negotiate away and what it wants to accept. It may be forced to accept certain things. And when it comes to the money, for example, this huge amount of money that we've got in the banks of theirs, one of the reluctances of the West to actually seize that money is, one, they want to use it as a negotiating tactic. Two, they also don't want to set a precedent of taking other states' money because they want to be seen as a solid sort of foundation, as a strong.
Basically, all the dodgy money around the world will start going into other banking systems, basically.
100%. And at the end of the day, but one thing that's always bothered me is the fact that the West has never had a concrete plan. If from the very beginning, as you hinted earlier, if we'd had a concrete plan, if we'd given them the weapons, if we'd seized the money and really gone all out, then Ukraine might have already won this war when Russia was at its most vulnerable in late 2022, early 2023. So it's
about the will, isn't it? Again, do you trust? I mean, given Donald Trump, his attacks on Zelensky, and he's obviously got the history, of course, over happened in his first term, and ended up being impeached over his basically he's withheld $400 million of aid to Ukraine, basically because Zelensky wouldn't agree to sort of instigate proceedings against her and give him information about Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. Now, do you trust that Donald Trump will, when the bluff has been called of Putin, who claims Donald Trump claims it wants peace, he doesn't want peace. He's not willing to come to the table. He wants to take Ukraine and take all of it. That actually, that Donald Trump will do what would, in my view, be the right thing and take on Vladimir Putin economically or militarily in whatever way. Do you think he will actually step up and help Ukraine or not?
It's a very difficult one. I'm honestly 50-50. At the end of the day,
because he's so unpredictable.
He's so unpredictable. Donald Trump is a very difficult person to read.
Does that help his negotiation then? Because Putin won't be able to read him either.
Putin is afraid of him. Quite frankly, I think a lot of other states are afraid of Donald Trump because he is so difficult to read. But I have to say, he has done things over the last couple of months, over the last month, which do not make any sense. He's trashed American soft power to such an extent that there are aspects of it I just don't think America could ever get back. Maybe at least not for a generation. So the reputational damage for such a little gain, for something that he might have, getting the Europeans to spend more is absolutely right. Great.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
But he could have done it in a very different way than he did.
Yeah.
So some of this stuff just doesn't make any sense from a diplomatic international relations point of view. So my biggest fear is that if he was a rational actor, he would listen to his security personnel, the people advising him, and he would actually crack down on Russia now. But there is also the fact that there's some things we just don't know.
No, indeed. Just finally, I mean, I'm sure I've put this to you before, but when we have people on social media, and again, there's a lot of Russian troll farms, a lot of the people who believe an awful lot, including, I would say, Donald Trump, it would appear, Elon Musk, a lot of what is said online, which is abjectly, blatantly untrue. That this is about Zelensky, doesn't care about peace. He wants to put his men through the meat grinder. I mean, we're talking about tens and tens and tens of thousands of young men who've died on both sides, bearing in mind Russian military also just as much victims of this, people who were conscripted and forced into battle, and many, hundreds of thousands also maimed, injured for life. The Ukrainian people have taken a great toll from this. You fought on behalf of the Ukrainians. You've been on the front line. You've taken those risks. How much are the Ukrainian people willing, from your experience, to fight? How long are they willing to fight on? Because fundamentally, this should be their decision rather than ours, armchair generals like myself, or indeed even Donald Trump.
Well, they are, to be honest, they would keep fighting until they get a deal that they can work with. Because you can, I think I've said this before on the show, the old Reagan quote of, you can have peace tomorrow, all you've got to do is surrender. The Ukrainians will never accept that. They will. They would rather keep fighting than get a bad deal or see their country carved up and not have a future anymore. So, but they want peace. No one wants peace more than the Ukrainians and more than Zelensky. But it can't be peace at any cost. And one thing that's so frustrating is that Donald Trump, he does tend to overpromise and underdeliver. This is a Musk problem as well. And then claim later that the targets that he set weren't actually fixed in stone, and that it doesn't actually bother him. It doesn't matter to him after all. And the frustrating thing is that this deal feels like it's being rushed by the Americans. And if you rush a deal, you'll get a bad deal. And
Donald Trump said, he wanted to get this fixed on day one. Well, it's not day one. I mean, again, I'm wondering, is he more concerned about his Nobel Peace Prize, which, by the way, Obama got and didn't deserve, hadn't achieved anything, definitely hadn't achieved peace before, rather than actually achieving peace. Really good to talk to you, Mesa Gifford, a former British volunteer with the Ukrainian Army. He's been on the ground on that. Philip Ingram, still listening to that, former senior military intelligence officer. What do you make of what Mesa had to say?
I agree with absolutely everything that Mesa said.
Well, it's a bit of a love-in today.
It is, he's putting it very, very clearly indeed. Putin is not, he's trying to big himself up. He's trying to set the conditions to get what Putin wants. He's playing a very dangerous game with an unpredictable Trump. And therefore, Trump's reaction today is
there an argument that Trump's unpredictability, and his sort of scattergun, his just sort of, what's he going to do today approach, and we wake up every morning and go, good Lord, what's he done today? And some of it I agree with, some of it I disagree with. That does mean that, strongmen, world leaders like Vladimir Putin can't. He could have predicted what Biden was going to do. He could have predicted what Obama was going to do. In fact, actually, these men often were acting in a weaker way. But there's no doubt at all in my mind, Biden did think that the West weren't going to offer enough military aid to Ukraine that was much as they got. He was surprised by the sanctions. He was surprised by the unity, which is a massive failing of Western diplomacy, by the way. He should have expected it to be stronger than it was, rather than the other way around. It's an abject failing for which, again, a head should roll. But if he can't read Donald Trump, if he thinks Donald Trump's on his side, he can get away with it, and then he gets hit with massive sanctions, then he gets hit with massive military aid to Zelensky because he won't come to the table, that could work in Ukraine's favour, couldn't it?
It could do. There's two things that are the result of the uncertainty that Donald Trump creates. One, greater uncertainty in those other decision makers, so they're less likely to do something, but also potential greater opportunities where someone goes, oh, actually, he's causing confusion left, right and centre. I'll exploit that and just deal with it. So he's making us more stable in one hand and less stable in another. And the war is not going to be won. Everyone talks about whether you're going to win it in the front line. No, there are three levels of war. The tactical level, which is the front line, the operational level, which is what's going on, Russian attacks into Ukraine, Ukrainian attacks into Russia, to the wherewithal to be able to continue that tactical battle, and then the strategic level. Strategic level we're saying at the minute, which is the international negotiations. Operational level, Ukraine's winning, tick, because they're attacking Russia proactively. The tactical level is virtually stalemate.